The new small engines. The four small engines surveyed the newcomers.
Okay.
The small controller introduced them. These, he said, are our new engines. Their names are Basil, Pegasus, and Franklin D. Roosevelt. Pegasus, asked Bert. Isn't that the name of a flying horse? Don't be silly, Bert, said Rex. Horses can't fly. Bert's referring to a pretend horse, Rex, Jolt explained. According to Greek mythology, Pegasus was a winged horse that the god Poseidon used to ride. He was later taken by the guardian Medusa. Quite right, Jock, continued the small controller. Now I want all four of you to make our new friends welcome. Yes, sir, said the engines, we will. Rex, Bert, and Jock got to talking with the new engines and found that they were quite friendly. Mike didn't say anything. He just glared at Pegasus. After a while, the other six engines noticed that Mike was being unusually silent. Oi, Mike, called Rex. Come over and say hello. Still, Mike said nothing. He simply puffed away, scowling at Pegasus as he passed. I wonder what's crawled up his smart what's today, said Jock. Basil, the smallest of the new engines, spoke up. Is there something wrong with your friend? He asked innocently. Yes, said Rex thoughtfully. But I wonder what it could be. Unfortunately, you'll have to wait till the next story to find out. The color red. Frank pushed Franklin D. Roosevelt, or FDR for short, into the workshop the next morning. Why is FDR in the works, sir? Bert asked. Is something wrong with him? Certainly not, smiled the small controller. I just want him to be repainted, just to keep things a little different and interesting. While the men were painting FDR, Mike was taking his morning goods train. At his first stop of the morning, he met Blister 1, one of the maintenance diesels. Is Robert aggravated because Blister 2 is the same colour as you are? Asked Mike. No, replied Blister 1. In fact, I'm quite the opposite. I'm glad that my twin and I are the same colour. Why do you ask? That new engine Pegasus, said Mike. He's still my colour. Blister 1 stared. You're not seriously angry with Pegasus because he has the same colour as you do, are you? Laughed Blister 1. If so, that is one of the silliest things I've ever heard. It shouldn't matter that the two of you are the same colour. If anything, it should make the two of you get along even better. Mike said nothing. He just steamed away. Later that day, he had to take a passenger train. There were more passengers than he had ever seen before. Several more coaches had to be added to the train just to carry them all. But when it was time to leave Arlesdale Station, the train was too heavy for Mike to carry. You'll need to call for help from one of the others, said his driver. So they did. A few minutes later, Pegasus backed down onto the train in front of Mike. What is this? Said Mike. Why is he here? I've come to help, said Pegasus as the two engines started off. "And not only do I need to help you, but you'll be helping me also." "How do you mean?" asked Mike. "Well, I am new to this railway after all, and I don't know my way about," Pegasus went on. "Perhaps, since you've been here much longer than I have, and know the line quite well, you could show me how it's done." Mike hadn't thought of that. He finally had someone who looked up to him. So Mike did show Pegasus the line, and by the time the two engines got back to Arlesdale, they were chatting away like old friends. That night in the shed, Blister 1 and Mike were talking. "So I hear you and Pegasus doubled a train this afternoon," said Blister 1. "That's right," smiled Mike. "I know that new engine now. He's not even half bad, even if he did steal my colour." "Actually," said Blister 1, "funnily enough, he didn't steal your colour. You stole his." "What do you mean?" asked Mike. "You see, Pegasus was built in 1927, went on Blister 1, and that was a good 39 years before you came along." But Mike didn't care. He was now proud to share the colour red with his new friend Pegasus. Basil gets bugged. One evening, Basil was telling the engines about his days on his old railway in Kent, England. "My brother was built at the same time as me," he said. "We looked very smart together." "What was his name?" asked Bert. "The Bug," replied Basil. "The Bug?" snorted Mike. "What sort of name is that?" "He was named the Bug," continued Basil, "because of our unusual shape. When the workmen had finished building the two of us, they jolted built like oversized bugs. Our controller overheard them and decided to name my brother the Bug. The other engines agreed that this was a rather silly name for an engine, but Basil paid no attention. He kept bragging about how smart he and his brother were into the wee hours of the night. The next day Basil was taking a passenger train. He was running through a part of the line that had a lot of trees. Then it happened. Some bugs had been attracted by the noise and by Basil's bright paint. Soon several bugs were crawling all over Basil. "What's this?" he said. "Looks like bugs to me, old boy," Basil's driver replied. "Get 'em off me!" Basil almost shrieked. "They're disgusting!" "Oh, they're harmless," laughed the driver. "At least they aren't bees. One of the drivers from the Fat Controllers Railway told me about an engine who got stung by a bee right on the nose." This didn't do much to lessen Basil's fear of the insects that now surrounded him. He shuddered at the very thought. The bugs were still clinging to Basil when he reached the end of the line. Rex was on a siding near Arlesdale station. "Well, hello there, Basil," smiled Rex. "Feeling a bit bugged today, are we?" "Oh, shut up, Rex," snorted Basil. "Oh, sorry," laughed Rex. "Am I bugging you?" Basil steamed off without another word. His crew gave him a good wash down, which got rid of all the bugs. That night when Basil came home to the sheds, the other engines were talking in hushed voices. "Look," whispered Rex, "here he comes." "Who?" asked the others. "The Bug," whispered Rex. "That's not the Bug," said Bert. "That's Basil." "No, there was a last-minute mix-up," went on Rex. "They sent the Bug to us, but they accidentally switched his nameplate with Basil's. He certainly lives up to his title, but with all the bugs crawling around him earlier today, The other engines laughed, all except for Basil, who, as you'd expect, was less than amused. The Case of the Missing Station. The small controller was making plans to tear down the station of Farquhar Road. Franklin D. Roosevelt, who had just come out of the workshops with a splendid coat of royal purple, was taking the small controller and some men to the road. The men were from a firm that tore down old buildings and rebuilt them. However, when they got to the station, they were in for a nasty shock. "Where is it gone?" asked the small controller, bewildered. FDR and the men looked on in disbelief. All of Farquhar Road, the entire station, was gone. "It was just here yesterday," continued the small controller. "So how can this be? Where did it go?" That night in the sheds, FDR told the other engines about what had happened. "I was taking the small controller to Farquhar Road this morning," he said, "but when we got there, it was gone." "What do you mean, gone?" asked Rex. "It's not like it just could have gotten up and walked off by itself." "I think," FDR continued, "it was stolen." The other engines laughed. "Who would steal an entire station?" asked Sigrid of Arlesdale, a diesel engine who mainly took passenger trains. "Can you think of any other explanation as to how one day a station is there and the next day it isn't?" asked FDR shortly. None of them could, all except for Blister 2, another one of the maintenance diesels. He stayed very quiet. Next day he went to speak to the small controller. "Sir," said Blister 2, "I think I know what happened to the station at Farquhar Road." "And what would that be?" said the small controller. You see, sir, a few days ago some men came to see me," Blister 2 continued. They said that Herdy wanted Farquhar Road turned down, and they wanted to help. So that night I took them to the station. They took everything out of it, completely demolished it, and cleared up the mess before anyone else woke up." "I see," said the small controller. He turned away for a moment, and then turned back to Blister 2. "It was brave of you to own up to your mistake, Blister 2, he went on. "But if anything like that happens in future, please come tell me about it before doing anything else with men that you don't know." "Yes, sir," sighed Blister 2. A few days later, the men who stole Farquhar Road were caught and arrested. The police also found everything that had been taken from the interior of the station and returned to the small controller. Farquhar Road was then rebuilt and looked better than ever, and from that day to this, Farquhar Road is famous for being the only station in Sodor that has been completely stolen. A grand day out. The small controller stood in front of the sheds. All of the little engines listened intently. "Tomorrow," said the small controller, "will be the 43rd anniversary of when our railway first opened. Now, while that might not seem like such a big deal, it is in fact quite important, especially when you take into account that when we first started out here, we didn't know if we'd even be open for a full year. So tomorrow, I want all of you to meet me at Arlesdale Station at noon. We shall have a grand party." The little engines were excited. At last the great day came. The drivers and firemen spent all morning cleaning and polishing the engines, and when it was time for them to go to Arlesburg, their coats shone like gold. Duck, Oliver, Donald, and Douglas watched as the small engines lined up at Arlesburg. Rex, Mike, Bert, Frank, Jock, Blister 1, Blister 2, Sigrid of Arlesdale, Basil, Pegasus, and Franklin D. Roosevelt all looked marvelous. Lots of people came to see them. The station was more crowded than it had ever been before. Lots of people gave speeches, including the small controller. When he was done, one of the big engines spoke up. "3 cheers for the Arlesdale Small Railway," shouted Duck. Everyone cheered, and the big engines blew their whistles. The little engines had never been so proud in all their lives. They all blew their whistles back. The noise was deafening. After the cheering and whistling had died out, Mike, Bert, Jock, Basil, and FDR were uncoupled from the lineup and coupled to a special train. The cavalcade moved out of the station to even more cheers and whistles. That night in the sheds, the small railway engines talked about their grand day out. "The small controller does know how to throw a party, doesn't he?" "He certainly does," smiled Frank. "I can't remember the last time I've had so much fun," put in Basil. All of the other engines agreed. They talked and talked about their party until it was nearly midnight. Then gradually, they all went happily to sleep. All of the engines read about in these stories are based on real engines from real railways. They are as follows. From the Reverend Glass and Esther Railway, Rex is based on number 7, River Esk. Mike is based on number 9, River Might. Bert is based on number 3, River Ert. Frank is based on number 4, Perkins. Jock is based on number 10, Northern Rock. Sigrid of Arlesdale is based on number 7, Sledge of Eskdale. Blister 1 and Blister 2 are both based on number 9, Cyril. From the Romney, Hythe and Dymchurch Railway, Basil is based on number 4, the Bug. Pegasus is based on number 5, Hercules. And Franklin D. Roosevelt is based on number 9, Winston Churchill. Please feel free to go either to the Ravenglass and Eskdale Railway or the Romney, Hythe and Dymchurch Railway and say hello to those and other engines on those railways. I'm sure they would be glad to have you anytime. Good night.